2024 is the final battle. They're going after Trump, but if they can get Trump, it means they can get you, they can get me, they can get all of us. He is standing in the way, and that can sound like a campaign slogan, but it's very true. Now we're approaching the most important battle of our lives. Now, for the very first time in American history, a sitting president's DOJ has indicted his top political rival ahead of a presidential campaign. When they indicted me for nothing, I said, now the gloves are off. Now we have to say if I can accuse a crook.
I can feel it coming in the air tonight. Oh Lord, and I've been waiting for this moment for all my life. Oh Lord, can you feel it coming in the air tonight?
Now we're approaching the most important battle of our lives.
Oh Lord.
If you fuck around with us, if you do something bad to us, we are going to do things to you that have never been done before.
Well, you told me you were drowning, I would not lend a hand. I've seen your face before, my friend, but I don't know if you know who I am. Well, I was there and I saw what you did. I saw it with my own two eyes. So you can wipe off that grin. I know where you've been. It's all been a pack of lies.
If you have a problem with someone, you have to go after them. And it's not necessarily to teach that person a lesson. It's to teach all of the people that are watching a lesson.
The last time we ever met, but I know the reason why you keep me silent.
When we get back in the White House, I will totally obliterate the deep state.
The hurt doesn't show, but the pain still grows. Some strangers to you and me. I can feel it coming in the air tonight. Oh Lord, and I've been waiting for this moment for all my life. Oh Lord.
When we get back power, I don't really want to have peace with these people who did this to us and are continuing to do this to us. We have to turn the tables on them, give them a dose of their own medicine, and then we can even the playing field, and then we can discuss unity.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Patriot Underground. Today is July 9th, 2026. Thank you so much for joining me, folks, to discover the truth beneath the surface. As always, I really do appreciate everybody out there taking the time to listen. And it just so happens that I have the honor of welcoming my good friend, Mark Messina, a.k.a. 8-Track, back to the show. Mark and I met a while back on the News Treason call-in show, just kind of randomly. We had never come into contact before, and ever since we've developed a great friendship. Turns out that we're from similar parts of Massachusetts. We grew up basically neighbors without even realizing it. And I think folks know Mark, and they're aware of his platform, Parallel 8 Media. But in addition to being a stand-up comic, which I absolutely love, a podcaster and a truther, he just so happens to be, in my opinion, one of the best interviewers out there. And if you haven't done so already, you really need to check out and follow his channel on Rumble. There is a link directly in the description. So if you're not following Parallel 8 Media, make sure you click on that link and you follow my good friend, Mark. So, brother, it's great to see you. It's great to have you back. How you doing tonight?
Dude, it's always good to see you, man. I'm glad we're doing this today. I stopped doing a lot of shows during the week, especially because I really put my life into the podcasting when I started it. And then I realized, oh, yeah, I have bills to pay, you know?
Yeah.
And I tried to pretend I didn't. I'm like, oh, you know, give it a year. You'll make up the same money, but you didn't. So now I'm usually just doing my Friday and Sunday shows, but dude, a chance to do this with you, doesn't matter when. I'm excited to be here, man.
Well, that's my attitude about it, man. If you call, I'm going to answer, and I'm always going to jump at the opportunity to get together with you and chop it up and just discuss everything that's going on. It's been way too long. We both agreed upon that, and it's just always such a great feeling to sit down with somebody who is of like mind. And in the past, we've had some amazing discussions, and I'm quite confident that today is going to be yet another informative one that people are going to enjoy. So make sure you hit that like button if you haven't already and share this broadcast. Obviously, there are so many different topics that we can get into, but recently I've really been gravitating toward beginning with the 40,000 foot view, which just so happens to be the title of your Sunday show, I believe.
Yeah.
So, I mean, here we are, man. We've seen the 4th of July, 250th celebration of America come and go. And most of us, of course, who are dialed in and following the operation, we find ourselves in a somewhat speculative frame of mind, thinking about what we might see transpire in the weeks and months ahead, of course, while at the same time taking stock of the ongoing exposure operation. The reveals are coming fast and furious, as you know, and several of the different barometers of progress are very important to pay attention to as we move closer to what Q defined as the precipice. And you and I have both in the past felt very precipicey at certain points, that's to use your word. But, here we find ourselves. And certainly we've all felt as if we were approaching this point several times before on this journey. And consequently, we've learned to temper our expectations and instead focus our energy on how the events and developments we're being subjected to are moving the needle incrementally, albeit slower than perhaps we want it to be, closer to the justice phase. So with that said, why don't you give us your big picture thoughts, your overall assessment of where we find ourselves here in the early summer of 2026?
I mean, fine, since you asked. Fine. Okay. Fine, I'll do it. Fine.
I'm twisting your arm, man.
Listen, man, we were actually kind of hinting at some of this stuff when we were on the phone earlier. It's like Q was boot camp, and it was boot camp not for what we thought, right? I don't know if you've seen my pivot lately. I've been doing a lot of relationship stuff, and people didn't really get it, but now I think people are understanding. The Great Awakening for me has been a return to self, and that means regulating your nervous system, like period, end of story. Guys like you and me, everyone out there watching us, we all have that in common, some sort of hypervigilance, some sort of past traumas that made us need to dig. And let's be honest, obsess is a good word for how a lot of us have spent a long time. I've been doing this 25 years. Okay. Yep. So people are like, oh, 10 years ago, you came down the golden escalator and I've been obsessed since. I'm like, well,
you go back to 9/11. I don't remember.
About 15 years before that is when I started. And then you sort of look at what Q did, and it corralled all of us, lost souls, broken in our own special ways. And it gave us a community, and it gave us a purpose. But what it really did was it intentionally put our nervous system on a roller coaster. And I think that's because it was a 10-year protracted operation, assuming, the mass arrest happened this year. Maybe it's an 11-year, or 12-year, whatever, But the point is, we all went through date fagging and being let down. And date fagging, it's like doing push-ups for your nervous system. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we would have gotten this far had we not sort of had it was like tough love. It was like kind of like a dad's, like, it hits you the back of an open hand, but you learned your lesson. Q's kind of like, dad, like, don't make me ball this up, But the problem is a lot of people, I think, are gun shy now, and people want to say, it's coming, the mass arrest, it's coming. And then nothing happens, and people are like, I give up. I think that's the point. I think when it comes Because listen, I don't have any doubt. I mean, Q told us it's going to happen here the way it happened in Saudi Arabia. That was an overnight purge. That wasn't like a slow trickle of people getting arrested wearing masks. They went in one night and they swept up, what was it, 500 of the worst, princes and royalty in Saudi Arabia. Boom, overnight.
And same thing with El Salvador too, with Bukele. Similar process.
Right. Yeah. Right. And I mean, I think they just did one. I think it was Joe Lango was saying they just did one in maybe Iraq. And I think it wasn't really on the mainstream news, but he was like, in Iraq, it's all they're talking about. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing this happen. I know it's happening. I'm not going to date fag and break my own heart anymore. You know what I mean?
I feel you, bro.
But it's gotta be coming, because that's the only way any of this makes sense. And Trump take the Q drop about taking those slings and arrows for you is so relevant now when you see Trump shining the light on Bibi by pretending he's controlled by Bibi.
Yeah.
Like that's oh, y'all want to hate me? Well, then hate him too. It's freaking brilliant. So that's what I think about that.
Well, honestly, man, and we could dig into this. I was going to ask you some questions about the Middle East and Iran and Israel and all that a little bit later in the show, but I've been of the opinion that, and you mentioned a pivot, like your own personal pivot. As you probably know, I've gone in a slightly different direction as well, always maintaining and being front and center with my audience that my whole outlook on this operation is centered in the Q drops. That hasn't changed, but the way that we respond to the events that are happening, particularly what we've seen with Trump over the past year, optically going in the opposite direction of what many of us believed he was going to play out when he came back for his third term. You'll recall that he hit the ground running, record number of executive orders. It just seemed as if the floodgates were going to open right away. And
it did, didn't it?
Right. And then gradually it's like we got deeper into 2024. We had the whole Charlie Kirk event. And then, you fast forward. I mean, obviously I can't sit here and do I could, but I'm not going to sit here and do a laundry list of the major events that transpired. But particularly the decision to go into Iran was, I see that as sort of a major demarcation line, so to speak, that seemingly divided his base. And ever since then, he's been cozying up to people like Netanyahu, which I don't really think that's the real guy, but people like Mark Levin and so forth. And it's almost as if there's been this redefinition of who's MAGA and who's not. Meanwhile, he's cast aside people like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and major voices out there. And that's alienated a lot of people. And it seems very confusing on the surface. But I happen to think that what Trump is doing and the White Hats are doing are causing us to experience our own, as Anons, our own level of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
In order to perhaps broaden our perspective on what our role is moving forward. What are your thoughts on that?
First of all, yes to everything. It's also kind of an intelligence test. And I don't mean to, I'm not trying to, talk smack about people who question it, because it's designed to be questioned, right? If you look at it from our standpoint, it's so obvious, Candace and Tucker and all these people, all of a sudden they're talking about Israel, but Candace, to make it safe, starts talking about Brigitte Macron's penis as well. So but like that's by design, right? So, hey, I'm a female black conservative. I can get away with more. So I'll just kind of muddy it, kind of like the Alex Jones model. Because Macron's wife is a man. We all know that. But nobody's saying that. So she says that. She says Israel. So it gives some sort of, let her get away with it. She's going crazy, right? But meanwhile, they're saying the things Trump can't. They've seeded this everywhere.
Yep.
And then Trump says, we're not going to go to war. No new wars. And we all know that Iran is not a new war. This is a final battle, but it's a proxy with NATO. It's not really a war with Iran. Mm-hmm. And
I think it's a controlled situation for sure.
100%. And so what is it doing? It is, today I was on Instagram, and the reels that are going viral. There's this one where there's a little Trump doll and Bibi's playing with it, and you'll do what I say. And it's like animated, and that shit's going viral. People are buying it. And I'm not going to jump in the comments and be like, you guys have low discernment, because the whole point was to get people mad so that Trump is the proxy for getting people to look at Israel and Bibi and Mossad.
Yep.
Right. So we're clear. We're not talking about the Jews. I know we have to say that, but we're talking about Bibi, and no one was ever able to talk about him. And the reason I know in this regard, the Patriots had a plan is because I've been on normal social media for a long time. And you can't say any of this kind of stuff, or your account's banned, your stuff is pulled down, hate speech for a couple of years now. It's all been going around. Yep. That is by design. Trump is like, oh, I know. I said wouldn't go to war, but he's making me do it. It's just such an obvious theater to get people to realize what's going on. The fact that they don't, I get it. They had like lives and stuff like us. They were doing other things with their time. But yeah, I just think that that part of it, I think, has just been the most masterful theater ever.
Absolutely. It's putting the spotlight on the country that we know is being saved for last. And as I've always said, the more Israel comes into focus, the more that's an indication that we are approaching the end game. Like you said, we're not going to date fag. We're not going to speculate about when things are going to happen. But certainly as a barometer, when you start to see, and that's something that's been probably one of the strongest elements that's kept me rooted in my faith in this operation, despite all of the crazy optics, because I'd be lying if I said I didn't have my days when I was questioning things, right? But the fact that there's been, especially on X, the biggest social media platform in the world, has been just open season on Netanyahu, the Zionists. And yes, you're absolutely right. We always have to put out this disclaimer. At least I feel obligated to do so. We're not talking about Jews at large. Like we're not condemning anybody who's Jewish, because I happen to have a lot of Jewish friends who are normies just like everybody else. As a matter of fact, I have a few that are actually starting to wake up with regard to this Zionist Greater Israel Project regime that's being pushed, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But let's kind of pivot here. I thought maybe we could structure the show a little bit talking about what's happening domestically, and then we could branch out from there. And what I really wanted to get your take on is kind of a wide-ranging subject: the construction of data centers to support the expansion of AI and humanoid robots. We've seen more and more of that pumped out into the narrative space. And as you know, over the last several months, this has been a really hot topic that's been debated quite vigorously, both inside and outside of our community. And I think that's all by design. There are those who view this as a positive development for humanity, basically mirroring the public statements that have been made by Elon Musk, asserting that this advanced technology is going to be wielded for the betterment of humanity. But like any other tool, and we usually reference this metaphor in terms of guns specifically,
right,
it has the potential to do just the opposite. It really depends upon who's wielding the tool and what their intentions are. Now, having said that, when you look at the most recent polls, right, it's quite clear that a vast majority of Americans, last time I looked, it was above 70%, oppose the construction of these data centers in their local communities. In fact, there have been several examples of people banding together to voice their opposition successfully and having these projects shut down. Conversely, there have been many examples where this agenda is just simply moving forward despite the opposition of the citizens, many of whom are being kicked off of their property under the pretext of eminent domain in order to move forward with the implementation. Whether or not you believe that's real or optics, certainly that's something we can get into, but this is what's being presented to the general public. And then additionally today, to add kind of another layer to all of this, it was reported that the unelected European Parliament has passed a chat control proposal allowing private messages to be monitored. And here in the US, it also appears as if the internet age verification laws are rapidly moving forward, which many see as a backdoor avenue to implementing digital ID. And so it seems as if there's this unified push by the elites to move forward with this agenda with very little public debate about the impact of AI on humanity itself. As a matter of fact, I had an in-depth conversation with my good friend Ricardo Bossi about this not too long ago. So I'd like to hear your take on the data centers and more broadly, your view on AI itself and whether this is a net positive for humanity.
Great freaking question, dude. Listen, before I even answer that, like, you agree with me that the AI we have is crazy sophisticated, that like you and me have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you agree that for probably decades, they've had stuff way more powerful than this.
Oh, yeah.
Way. Maybe even they've had the quantum AI for who knows how long.
Well, I think that it's perfectly aligned with how the Q operation has been set up. They're using these advanced quantum computers with AI that is light years ahead of what we have available to us. But go ahead.
I mean, if you think about it, right, with the, like you said, light years with the quantum, and they would be able to game out billions, I don't know, trillions of scenarios again and again to see how they would play out, right? That's how you would predict the future. I don't think there's a Stargate. Sorry to break it to everyone. I don't think and if they have it, that's not what Q's talking about. I don't think Q's soft disclosing time travel, but maybe I'm wrong. I think he's telling us that they had quantum and they could literally game out every possible scenario over a 20-year and see what every branching tree, what future it would lead to. It's probabilities, right? So if it's already there, it's not going away. As it's proliferating around the world, it becomes the most dangerous and deadly weapon man has ever seen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's called national security. The military cannot just say, oh, hey, let's just let private corporations, like when Trump had all those people from Stargate and OpenAI up at his inauguration, we're all like, oh my God, he sold out. No, they put someone from the military on the board of all theirs, and they're under military control. They appear to operate like a normal commercial business, but they have absolute military control. You saw when Claude released their latest model, Fable 5, and then they had to take it down like 10 minutes later, and then it didn't come back up for a while. I've worked at big companies like that. I'm sure you have too. They don't operate that quickly. Military does.
Yep.
Fable would have run for a couple days or at least, a day. And then they would have been like, oh shit, look what it did. The military was like, turn it off. Can't have that out there yet. I mean, all the theories about why, I think those were just clickbait, but it did happen. I got the notification from Claude. So given that, it ain't going away. It's a matter of national security. And if we're being honest, like, there's no stopping it. There's no stopping it. We have to control it. We have to advance it. It's kind of an arms race. So do I like all the data center stuff all over? No, of course not. Do I think it's a psyop like someone in the chat said? There's psyop elements to it, but I don't know. Is the psyop going to be like, oh, hey, thank you for all speaking up. We're going to put them all in Greenland and Antarctica now, which why don't they? Because then you don't have to worry about the cooling. But anyway, that's another issue. But I just think that like we're going into a new paradigm, and part of the psyop, let's be honest, Q, it's not Operation Trust, but it is still a psyop for us. It is. And we were the kind of people who were against government surveillance. But yet here we are sort of ushering it in. Isn't that interesting? Because the truth is, they've already had the AI. They've already surveilled everything we do. So as private corporations and, NGOs and, evil states were going to implement this stuff for like a total surveillance control grid, we stepped in and said, yeah, well, we'll use it for a control grid, but we'll put it under the surface. We won't make people see it. People will know. It's kind of, I hate to say it, not everyone's afraid of God, but people will be afraid of this.
Yeah. No,
so it's the future. It's literally, I can't even guess what the world's going to look like in 10 years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that you mentioned a couple of really interesting things. Operation Trust is one, and also the inevitability of this technology moving forward. And I've long made the case that, I mean, sure, in a perfect world, it would be wonderful if before all of this technology was deployed on humanity, that we would actually have a say, we would actually be involved, have a seat at the table to have a debate about where this technology is going to take us. Right? I mean, and you go back, I mean, that's not the world that we live in, right? This is the elite agenda. And I agree with you that it's under military control. But at the same time, there's always that question of, well, what if we're wrong? And what if this is actually going to be used to implement some sort of a technocratic dystopian system, and it's being constructed all around us? And that's where I guess you could say, the black pillars, or the people who are very suspect about the Q operation, they make the argument that there's a lot of parallels between Operation Trust back in Bolshevik Russia and the the attempt to move forward with this agenda while placating and keeping us docile and complacent, believing that this is going to be a net benefit for humanity. This is a positive benevolent operation. Now, you and I both agree, and obviously we wouldn't be having this discussion, I don't think, that Q is a psyop, but it is a positive, beneficial, benevolent psyop.
That's what I call it, the benevolent psyop. Yeah,
benevolent psyop for the betterment of humanity. But nevertheless, there is this concern about the existential threats that this poses, because if it did happen to go sideways, well, I mean, I think we both know that that would be a very bad situation. So when you are asked these types of questions, and you see the potential for this AI, for this technology, and you hear people like Elon Musk saying it's going to be great, the future is going to be amazing, we're going to have universal high income, we're going to have, I mean, they're already saying that 90+% of the jobs, even white collar jobs, are going to be replaced by robots. We've seen the videos of the humanoid robots doing stuff that was considered to be purely science fiction mere 5 years ago. How do you react to that, and how do you kind of find that balance in between? I mean, how concerned are you that it could pose that existential threat for humanity, and how do you sort of reconcile that in your mind?
Yeah, dude. I mean, that's right on the money right there. Look, I'm not pretending that white hats are magic, and that this stuff can't get out of control, and that a Terminator-like future couldn't happen, right? All of that and a million other scenarios we haven't imagined are very possible, right? Does it scare me? I consider that it could happen. At this point, listen, dude, I found Christ. I got the kingdom within, and I believe that what's going to happen is going to happen. So I'm not scared of it.
Yeah.
I would be more scared if we weren't being shown this stuff, if we weren't being told this stuff, if we weren't being given these tools to use in our daily life, if we didn't see the data centers going up in our backyard, and then you and me had to do a dig on a Sunday to, use the Google Earth to find all these data centers popping up in the middle of the Sahara Desert, and then we're like, what's going on?
Hell is that? Yeah.
That would scare me. The fact that we there's only two options, right? The AI exists from the people who were previously controlling it, and we're all fucked. Or the AI exists under this new thing, and we hope they keep it under control, and we're not fucked. I don't really see other options there. So I'm just let's see it, baby. It's been an awesome, dude, the 70s were cool. The 80s were freaking awesome. The 90s was a thing. We've lived through some cool shit, man. Now we get to live through a transformation of society and culture and business and daily life. I don't know if Musk is bullshitting when he talks about the universal high income. That just sounds like one of his little things to rile people up. But who freaking knows? Really, what is the role of humanity at some point? We're getting into an existential crisis of why are we here, right? We need purpose. That's the only thing that keeps me going. But it's if you can't work and you can't do this, how do you find your purpose? I think it's still going to happen, but maybe it goes back to farming and family and all those things. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's been always one of my main concerns. It's it's great to just envision the future, like the Jetsons, where we just have robots doing all the menial work that we don't want to do, and we have all this extra time where we don't have to dedicate our hours and our energy toward working every single day to earn a living. I mean, that's very appealing on one level, but what you just talked about goes a lot deeper, which is, what is our purpose? And essentially, there's the question of, are we being systematically maneuvered into this position of transhumanism, where we're going to be essentially merging with technology? And what does that mean for humanity? And if not, or perhaps even if we are, what is our purpose moving forward into this future where we're facing that? And that's a great way to say it, is this existential crisis of, well, if everything that has ultimately defined humanity for thousands of years, that sense of purpose, that we get up in the morning. Sure, we don't want to go to work. We complain about our daily jobs and so on and so forth, but nevertheless, it gives structure and meaning to our lives. And if
Yeah.
all that goes away, well, then what? Right. And that's kind of the question that I struggle with, even beyond the idea of this dystopic future, because I'm with you. I mean, I found Christ many years ago, had my own personal awakening. I've heard your story. I know the audience has as well. So I'm perfectly comfortable with ultimately knowing how this story ends. The question is have we sort of switched timelines to this far more benevolent, beautiful future, or is it going to be this very dark path that we go down before Christ comes back and basically delivers humanity from this evil?
You know
But
what? Let's get weird, dude. I love what you're doing. Let's go there. Let's get real weird with it, because I don't know if you read the post I did. I don't know if it was a few days ago. I have no sense of time, where it was Think Mirror, and I just sort of talked about my own personal journey and my own personal great awakening and what it means to me. And had turned out to have nothing to do with rabbit holes, nothing to do with conspiracies, corruption, trafficking. It was about returning to self. In fact, I recorded an interview last night that I'm going to be airing on Sundays, 40K View. It's another relationship person, but people are going to love this one. Like, we got all existential about returning to self. The world was set up, right? If you want to say this was Satan's domain, right? And that's why we've got these entrenched cabals, deep states, that have created a matrix for us to live in. And it is a invisible prison for our soul. Mm-hmm. Ascension is not possible when you are in a state of fear and frustration and anxiety. We're all pulled to a lower frequency. And then some people might go to church regularly. Some people might do yoga. Some people might meditate. Some people take their ayahuasca. Whatever they're doing, they're trying to get out of that frequency. Yep. But ultimately, if 90% of your life is in a mental cage, you're not going to ascend in any meaningful way. And whatever form of God you believe in, like, I don't even think you need to believe that Jesus is coming back to kind of get with what I'm saying, which is, if you believe that souls are real, you believe that there's more than this earth plane, then the question is, why are we here? And so we've created purpose. Like, when I started podcasting and noticing that the audience was like really like thanking me and stuff, I was like, wait, now I have a purpose. I'm actually helping others. Mm-hmm. So I had jobs where I made a lot of money before in the past, and you just feel empty inside.
Yep.
Right. So if I were able to podcast all day, every day, because I didn't have to worry about money, I would feel good about what I was doing, because I'm helping humanity. And it's the healing and it's the growth. Listen, I think the devil's bargain is trauma and ascension is healing. And the hardest thing to do is heal. And we live in a world where even the traumas that God put here, the Matrix created so much trauma. So maybe, just maybe, this new world where there's no jobs, there's no this, there's no that, and we're going, what am I going to do? What's my purpose? Maybe that's the whole point. The paradigm is shifting so dramatically that it's literally freeing. We're so stuck in the Matrix prison that we go, well, what am I going to do then? We don't even know. I bet you, if we live in this world, it won't take very long for all of us to go, oh, this is what I'm going to do. This is who I am. This is how I'll contribute. This is how I'll grow and ascend and help those around me grow and ascend. And maybe that's the whole point of Earth, was to prime our souls for something bigger. And you got to put them in a hellhole. When you go to boot camp isn't like a gymnasium and you're doing pull-ups. Boot camp's like getting dirty, cutting yourself, falling off of freaking things. That's what Earth is. It's a dirty, messy, dangerous boot camp for our soul.
It's kind of like breaking you down. And that's essentially what boot camp is all about. They break you down systematically so that they can rebuild you. That's an interesting. Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe we're heading into a period where the freedoms we get will be used in ways we can't imagine. We'll find purpose and fulfillment in ways we couldn't imagine. And maybe that's what God wanted, for us to focus on our souls and community and cooperation, not in a socialist way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get you. No, and that's a really interesting theory. And it usually comes up in the discussions about, and I don't really talk too much these days about Nasara, Jassar, and all that, and the humanitarian projects and so forth. But that's kind of what it reminds me of, is that we're going to be, there's going to be such a level of abundance, because that's really what the matrix is based on. It's based on the haves and the have-nots, and constantly keeping us on this hamster wheel, or this rat race, to try to get ahead, to try to make more money, to seek externally things that are going to fill the voids inside of us. But it's based upon this lie of a lack of abundance. And if we've come to realize that actually there's more than enough for everybody out there, and we have everything that we need, we have all of our basic human needs taken care of, that opens up an entirely different viewpoint on what our purpose is and our existence moving forward. And perhaps our generation is going to be pioneering that process, but it's the only thing that we've ever known. And so applying that matrix like thinking to the unknown future, the potential that we could go in that direction, sometimes there's that disconnect where we say to ourselves, well, how's the economy going to run? Like, who's going to pump your gas? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that?
Like, what even is the economy? It's an artificial construct made up by fake money, controlled by puppet masters, and it's just another way of enslaving us, and we call it the economy.
That's true, right? But I guess what I just said, the way I said that, is kind of, I guess it's a perfect example of being somewhat locked in that matrix-like thinking of, well, we for thousands of years, human beings have found a sense of purpose in crafting tools and making things and constructing and building civilization. And it almost seems as if we're getting to the end of that phase, and we're facing this uncertain future where we could go in two different directions, right? We could go into that dystopic future, which neither one of us think is going to happen, or we could go down a path of extreme abundance and a true golden age for humanity, perhaps for thousands of years.
Yeah, and you just said two words. I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but civilization and abundance. What does that even mean? What is civilized? Like, we're not animals anymore. We have the most sophisticated weapons and tools for hurting other people ever. Are we civilized right now? Is this matrix civilized? And what is abundance? You could have all the groceries and all the ice cream and all the cars. Is that abundance? If your heart is empty, if you're on Prozac, if you're depressed, if you're suicidal ideation, what's abundance? So what is civilization? Maybe we haven't even found civilization. Maybe it started, and I don't even know, man.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, because you're right. But really, the void, and that's really, I honestly believe that's what the matrix is based upon. It's keeping that void inside of all of us, and creating the illusion that if we attain certain things, that we're going to be able to fill that void. And of course, that usually manifests in the form of money, in the form of status, etc. But we think if we can chase down those things, if we can just work hard enough and get all of those things, that we're going to be fulfilled on the inside. But the reality of the matter is, we all know, and certainly I'm not preaching poverty over here, but all you have to do is look at people who have millions, billions of dollars, and you can see that they're still empty inside. And that really is the perfect example, I think, of what you're talking about. We have to seek meaning and filling that void, that God-sized hole inside of us, in different ways.
I used to be a big fan back in the day of Bertrand Russell, the more modern philosopher. I don't know if you ever read him. Great stuff. And I just remember he had a book on something on happiness or something. And it was like, literally, for a man, happiness is a good, productive day of work. That doesn't mean sitting in an office. When I had a period of my life, I had a little ranch in Florida. God was, I think, showing me where I'm supposed to be, but telling me, not yet, dude. But I had it for a little while, and I would work on the land for 8 hours a day. I'd have different crews come in. My Spanish was good enough, and I was well armed because I had a lot of guys coming out of prison. Hey, can I bring my buddy on the work site tomorrow? I'm like, we've been on the work site for 3 months. Why is he available tomorrow? I go, he just got out of prison, right? They're like, yeah. Guy shows up with a machete through his eye, through his nose. It's like a big cut. So I was always armed, but I was on my feet. I was designing. I was building. I was creating land around me. I had every dime I had left, I had put into that. And it wasn't about that. Like, I was on my feet. I could see the creations, and I just never felt better than doing that. And I've worked on computers my whole life. And for this almost 2 years, I was like on my feet for 8 hours a day, and I just felt so good. Like, so what is happiness? I don't know. That was pretty close.
I love that, man. Absolutely love it. Well, I didn't expect that we were going to go in this direction. This is the beauty of our discussions here. But I want to try to cover as many different subjects as we can. So let's
do it.
We talked a little bit earlier about, we mentioned Israel, we mentioned Iran. So let's get into the geopolitical stuff for a second here. Now, we had the Iran conflict, quote unquote, kickoff. I believe it was back in the beginning, late February, early March. And it appears today that we're back at, and I put this in air quotes, war once again. It was announced yesterday that the U.S. military is preparing for an extended operation to control the Strait of Hormuz after the memorandum of understanding was supposedly violated. So the on again, off again war, quote unquote, continues. And meanwhile, Israel is continuing its, again, optically, its aggression in Lebanon. And Netanyahu 2.0 has now publicly laid the groundwork for a future war with Turkey. I'm sure you saw this. Although, interestingly enough, Trump responded by announcing that he's going to remove the sanctions on Turkey. And he's even floated the idea of selling them F-35 fighter jets, which Netanyahu has come out and said, oh, that'd be a really big mistake. That's going to upset the balance of power in the region, and so on and so forth. Now, this is actually something that I had predicted might happen. I mean, Q told us, as we all know, Israel was being saved for last. And I've speculated, of course, as many of us have, about different possibilities, including false flags that would end up boomeranging back and exposing Israel as the culprit, essentially revealing that they've never been our greatest ally, et cetera, despite all of the gaslighting that we've been subjected to for decades. And additionally, so there's that. And then additionally, to sort of add to the complexity of that relationship, there's been the widespread criticism of Section 219 of the NDAA for the fiscal year of 2027 that many are saying will be essentially a merger between the U.S. and Israeli military forces. I don't know if you saw this, but
I did, yeah.
Dennis Kucinich went on Tucker Carlson, and he talked about Section 219 being designed to drag the United States into future wars that Israel has planned for the Greater Israel Project. He said, quote, this entangles our military in whatever Israel chooses to do. They want to go to war against Egypt. They want to go to war against Turkey as a part of this Zionist expansion. And in the case of Turkey, as you know, they are a NATO country, which complicates matters significantly, which technically means that if Israel were to attack Turkey, then the United States would be legally required to engage the IDF. Now, obviously, I don't know if any of this stuff is going to happen. So much of it is optics, like we both talked about before, but I'm curious to get your perspective on what's unfolding in the Middle East, because that seems to be where they're directing so much of our attention now for at least the past 3 months. We've kind of taken a lot of the domestic stuff off of the front burner, put it on the back burner, and they're putting all of this, this geopolitical maneuvering on the front burner. So what are your thoughts on that?
I wish you would have cued some like dramatic music while you were talking about that. War with Turkey, war in the Middle East. Dun, dun, dun. Dun, dun, dun. All right, I have a lot of thoughts on that, but the first and most important thing is we cannot bomb Turkey because I have not flown there to get some hair transplant surgery yet, and that's the best and cheapest in the world.
Your hair is looking great, bro.
No, dude, it's all coming forward. It's not good in swimming pools.
I know the feeling, believe me.
But listen, man, it's Israel for last. We're at the end. The beginning was the first Q drop, and what happened in the same month as the Q drop and the Vegas shooting? The purge in Saudi Arabia, right? That was the beginning of a cycle that's ending now. Listen, I don't know if this little treaty agreement where the militaries merge is real or not, but it can only be one of two things, I think. It either is a real plan that Israel has, and we're just head faking so the world will see it. It's not going to happen. Or it's the other, which I'm kind of leaning towards. It's us taking over their military. Hello? Like, we've just systematically closed the whole world off against the Samson option and all of the we what's the first thing that happened after they had the purge in Saudi Arabia? Trump goes over there and they do a sword dance together. And you think it's a coincidence that those guys hate the radical Islamist jihadists? They hate them. and we got them over here as a problem. Well, these guys don't want those guys doing things to give their religion a bad rap. This is true, like, world unity. And listen, I know I don't want to get into an argument with anyone in the chat about, Islam. Like, I get it. But the point is, those are huge, powerful allies. Right? There's no war in the Middle East coming. It is all just posturing to end the Israeli control of the United States, of the region, the creating enemies, creating wars, bringing everyone into it. It's over. So are we going to go to war with Turkey? No. If there's a strike in Turkey, then I'll trust that there was something that needed to be handled there. There's still dark sites all over the world. A lot of these crazy storms I've been tracking, floods, tornadoes, earthquakes. I was just told last night that Mount Etna, which is right where I'm from, Messina, Sicily, has been erupting like over and over and over and over. That's not normal. So we're taking out dark sites and underground domes. We're doing all of those things, and we use cover. So if that's a cover for something, I'm not going to freak out. But do I think that there's going to be escalation? Do I think that our military is going to be controlled by IDF? Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. No,
absolutely not.
I totally agree with you. And Q told us that the war is real. The news is fake, but the war is real. And it really gets into a broader question here. And you and I were kind of discussing this a little bit earlier off air when we were on the phone. Now, obviously, as you know, within our community, there's a wide spectrum of different viewpoints on the degree to which the white hats are in control, right? And there are those who, the full control people who believe that everything that we're watching is scripted, that basically none of it is real. And then there are varying different levels of that. Now, you seem to kind of hint upon what I believe is going on is that, yes, there are indeed kinetic operations that are going on. Like I can't buy into the idea, as much as I want to, and as much as I've kind of gone down that road and I've explored that narrative with different people, I can't fully embrace this idea that every single thing that we're watching is scripted. Everything that we're watching is fake. Rather, I believe that there are indeed kinetic operations where there are deep state targets that need to be taken out. And that, like you said, the cover that's being used is the white hats are using the control of the mainstream media to be able to spin these narratives to create these psyops around it in order to generate conversations. But there are, in fact, real operations, military operations that are happening. Like I look at so much of the footage coming out of Iran, a lot of it was AI generated, but certainly not all of it. And right. Yes, there is the wag the dog theory. You can create the illusion of a war when it's not actually going on. But at this stage of human history where we have all of this technology, it would seem highly unlikely to me that they would be able to just weave that out of thin air and just create this entire illusion of a war when nothing kinetic was actually going on. So we discussed that a little bit earlier. I wanted you to share your thoughts on that.
Gosh, well, ask me a question out of that because I got a little lost in all of that.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. I kind of was elaborating perhaps a little bit too much, but how would you define the level of white hat control?
Okay, yeah. Okay. You and I are on the same page. All right. Here's the metaphor. Okay. Have you ever dated a narcissist, like a really good one, a really strong manipulator?
Yes, I have.
So you now know in hindsight, you could go into a party. That narcissist could walk into a room, quickly identify the weak-minded people who they could make their allies, the empaths who they could make their targets, right? And they would walk into a room and they could choreograph a complete scene, turning everybody on somebody, creating drama that didn't exist. No one in that room was reading from a script. No one in that room was notified. This narcissist had a level of control over people and emotions that they were able to create a full result. So you could say that narcissist had full control. Patriots to get narcissists in control.
All right.
Okay. So if you look at the number of times, we talk about chess in this whole movement, we're playing master chess. A chess master doesn't win with one move. They have to let the other person take a move and take a player, and around they go. Q told us moves and counter moves. So I believe you can have total control of this whole situation, especially with quantum AI, which means you've gamed out everything the enemy could do. But I think there are benefits in letting the enemy make moves. I think there are absolute benefits in terms of legally. This has gone on for 10 years. We're probably catching even smaller players and everyone involved in this. Election fraud, they could have, put the kibosh on that right away. They knew who all the key players are. But now they've mapped out every single courier and his son who took his bike to drop off ballots. Everyone's involved. So there are advantages to playing this out. But frankly, the world is a messy place. And this whole operation has provided nothing but cover for global kinetic operations. Do I think all the kinetic operations are over? No. Do I think the main ones are? Sure. Do I think some of the Q drops are talking about stuff that happened a long time ago? Yes. Do I think some of them are talking about stuff that maybe happened 3 or 6 months ago? Yes. That's the distinction. A lot of people think it all happened before Q posted. I don't think they would have had to use Q the way they have if it all happened. I think Q was like a head fake. The deep state's reading it. So disinformation is real.
Yep.
So repeats are necessary. Disinformation is necessary. The repeats are for us. The disinformation is for them.
Yeah.
People get lost in the fact that it's a multi-pronged psyop.
Exactly. And a lot of people, they can't really reconcile that idea that there are, in fact, still kinetic operations going on, but yet patriots are in full control. And you're right, it dovetails perfectly with what we talked about a little bit earlier with AI, quantum computers, etc. But it would seem to me only logical to conclude that as all of this stuff is playing out, yes, there's an element of it that's theater. There's an element that they're scripting the narrative, and they're presenting this narrative to the public for several strategic reasons, to achieve these psychological objectives, to generate conversation around these issues. But there actually are still threats out there that need to be neutralized.
Yeah, dude. I mean, look, one thing I'll say, the psychological operation to break the cognitive dissonance, the spell, the brainwashing that everyone is under, that probably takes 10 years. So you could argue that like Q had to exist for 10 years to do it. But Q's doing way more than that, right? We had the Hunter laptop come out through Q, and then come out through Q a few months later, and then come out through Q a few months later. And then a year later, it comes out in the mainstream media. And then 2 years later, it comes out. So we're doing all of this seeding. That's why we're able to talk about the things we are. That's why people are talking about Israel, and the algorithm's not stopping it, because we're in a different place now. It does take a long time to do that. And I think, people are underestimating the power of the spell over humanity. So this operation is designed with absurdity on purpose. And for those of us who started digging and getting answers, this phase is very frustrating, because this phase isn't for you and me. It's not for most of the people in our chat. It's for the people out there in Normie land. And they're going, what? And we're all mad. Like, how are you angry at Trump? How do you not see? Slow down, pump the brakes. They're not supposed to see. They were never supposed to see. That would be nice, but they're not equipped to. What we're doing now is we're showing them that everything is a clown show, that your TV, your news, your music, it's all lies. So we're slowly lifting the veil, and they're going, oh my God, what's back there? So it's frustrating for us now, but that's going to take another 10 years to get everyone. I mean, maybe I say that, and it's quite possible. That's what you and I and the rest of us are going to be doing for the next decade, is shepherding people into this, hey, it's okay. You were wrong about everything your whole life, but it's going to be okay. We've been there.
Well, the counter, and first of all, let me just say up front, I agree with what you're saying, right? The counter argument to that is at the sort of grassroots level. And I know we touched upon this on the roundtable. There was so many people on that show. It probably had too many people. So we weren't really able to dig deep into any of this stuff. But I do recall talking a little bit about the sentiment at the grassroots level for a lot of people is that, yes, they understand that the absurdity is baked into the cake for all the reasons that you just described. And yet there's this the frustration, of course, is very real, but I would posit that a big aspect of that is that people aren't seeing it manifest in their own personal lives. They're not seeing people, quote unquote, wake up, pay more attention, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of folks are saying, well, the crazier things get, the more people are kind of disengaging, and they're just saying, like, I don't even want to pay attention to this stuff. I actually saw a recent poll or a survey that was done. I wish I could remember exactly what it was or pull it up. I didn't know we were going to go here, but that it said that an increasing percentage of the population in America specifically is disengaging from the news because they just can't seem to make any sense out of all the absurdity of it, and they just kind of want to, and I guess, ignore a lot of the things that are happening. So there's that counter argument where people are saying, well, it's all being done in order to, like, like David News Treason always says, like, controversy breeds conversation, and it gets people engaged in the discussion and all that. And I believe that that's true, but a lot of folks aren't seeing it really play out that way. So I was curious to hear what, like, your own personal perspective on this, because you're out there in Vegas. I mean, I'm here in Massachusetts, so I have a very different perspective. Like I was sharing with you earlier in the show, it's like, I mean, I wake up every day and I'm looking for signs of any sort of indication that people are, that they're coming out of their coma, that their apathy is starting to dissipate a little bit, that they're getting a little bit more engaged. And I'm not seeing a lot of that evidence. That's not to suggest that the plan is not working. So just make sure that nobody mischaracterizes what I'm saying here. But I'm speaking to the level of frustration and the experience that a lot of people are having. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, you make a really good point, and that was something that bothered me too. Even though Nevada is technically red and has been, despite the election fraud, you don't see as much publicly because the executives at the casinos on the Strip, which is kind of the hub, it's a very small, thin crust of executives in this town. It's very much service industry, right?
Right.
So the handful of folks who are in charge of things, right? People kiss their asses, and they tend to be liberal because the companies encourage that. So people keep their mouth shut. Right. So it's frustrating, but here's what I've come to realize. The plan was to get everyone involved, not everyone unified. Right now, before this plan, before Trump, most people didn't vote. Most people didn't care. If you were liberal, it's because you watched the news at night, a few nights a week, and that was all it took. Right. But you weren't engaged. And a lot of those people didn't even care. They didn't even vote. So what we've done is we've engaged everyone into two corrals. And it doesn't matter that one corral is still getting booster shots. They're engaged. They're active. They're paying attention. And the attention is what has value. Without the attention, we can't create these narratives. We can't do these stories that make them so frustrated they stop watching the news. We can't control them emotionally if they're not engaged. So the part of the PSYOP that it finally made sense was that everyone needs to be engaged, and it doesn't matter if that means there's an even bigger group of left-wing nut jobs than before, because now we've got two parties engaged, debating, talking, dialogue, assassinating, whatever they like to do over there on their side. But I think that's the key, because whatever's coming is going to break down those walls. So it's best to have everyone paying attention and mad at Trump than being apathetic. That's
fair enough. That's fair. Well, okay, so I have a couple of different follow-up questions to that. You mentioned unification. I'm going to get to that in just a minute. I do agree that it's the engagement that is the most important, right? That's by far the most important thing. And you could certainly make the argument that despite the apparent division that seems to be increasing as time goes on, that's an indicator that people are at least engaged in the political process. So that is a good thing, right?
Yep.
But here's my question for you, and this is where a lot of folks, I think, got jammed up, including myself, at least initially when this started to happen. I alluded to it a little bit earlier in the show when we were talking about Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and the embracing of Netanyahu and Mark Levin and casting Marjorie Taylor Greene to the side and Thomas Massey and so forth. That caused, and primarily over the optics of war in the Middle East. That was really the major demarcation line. So what in your mind was the reason for that? Like, tactically speaking, you had 77 million people come out and vote for Trump in 2024. And a lot of people crossed the aisle. There was this enormous, like we talked about, there was an enormous sense of optimism. What's the advantage, or what is the tactical objective of dividing the MAGA base?
Let's make like I don't know, like a chemistry metaphor or something. Or when you were a kid, did you make potions at the table?
Sure.
Like I used to make potions, you know.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you're sitting at the dinner table at a restaurant, like, can I get a grape jelly and a ketchup? And you're making potions.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So let's say you got some red Kool-Aid and some blue Kool-Aid.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We got our two parties. When people start leaving the MAGA base and an MTG goes over to The View, you got a cup in the middle now and you poured a little red and blue in it. Now you got a purple or whatever. I don't know. Somebody out there with a color freaking wheel, tell me what the color is.
I think it's purple.
I'm going to call it purple.
Yeah.
Which is interesting about when you think about the royal purple and the purple ties. Maybe they got a different meaning. So now you got a third cup and you got people from both sides swimming in it and getting along because they're both hating Trump. That's the kind of conversation. That's the kind of, eventually everyone's unified in the purple cup, but it's not over a hate. People need to start talking across those lines. Two cups sitting apart, nothing gets communicated. You got a red cup, you got a blue cup, and everybody else, fuck you. Now people are like, well, you know what? I'm going to go on The View. Like it's all calculated. It's how you watered down extreme views.
I like that. Very interesting.
So that's what I think's going on.
Yeah, well, there's been a lot of discussion too out of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson. They both came out and basically said, you know, we need a new political party. We need a party that's America first, etc. Everything that Trump promised that MAGA was going to be, we actually need to, you know, to get rid of this. What we all know is the uniparty. Do you think that we might be going in that direction? That might be the objective, is to, and that's kind of where the unification piece comes in here with your, you know, your metaphor of the blue and the red Kool-Aid.
You like my potions metaphor?
I did, actually. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Is there a plan after Trump? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't it be awesome if somebody whose plane crashed, who appeals to both parties and is wildly charismatic and would have an incredible story to tell? You know, I'm not saying it has to be him, but it kind of had to be Trump. Like we're living in God's grand narrative. That's why all these things, like all credit to the Ghost Army and the military intelligence for doing this, but without God's, you know, hand, none of this stuff would be happening.
Yep.
I absolutely see the two-party system as it stands today going away, but I don't know. Like, I don't know what the world's going to look like, dude. Like, we may even though we're going to be a more benevolent police state, which is kind of what I call it, they might still need to corral people just to manage us. I don't know, but it won't be the same as it is now. So yeah, I see a new party as being an absolutely plausible next step somewhere down the road, not too far.
So Trump is being used, and this is something that I've discussed a lot, that Trump is being used as a psychological weapon, so to speak, or a tool, perhaps might be a better way to look at it, to be that lightning rod to create that sense of division that ultimately that appears as if it's division, but ultimately is going to dissolve so many of the barriers, the artificial barriers that have divided all of us. And you mentioned unification. Now, Q tells us very clearly that it's crimes against children that are going to divide, that are going to unify across party lines. I know I'm paraphrasing a little bit there. Now, we saw earlier this year a pretty significant, nowhere near the full picture. We all know it's the tip of the iceberg, but we saw a pretty significant Epstein files release that put this information out into the consciousness of the masses, because most people out there, they're really, regardless of whether or not it's being discussed on mainstream media, and even they couldn't ignore it, most people out there are shifting away from mainstream media more towards social media in order to get their news. And undoubtedly, I would say the vast majority of the country at least got a dose of human trafficking, satanic ritual abuse, raping, torturing children, adrenochrome, beef jerky, which is, of course, eating children. I mean, the most horrific things you can imagine. And as all of this stuff was coming out, I was thinking to myself at the time, I mean, talk about precipice. I was like, wow, this is it. This is really, they're maybe not right now, but it seems as if they're steadily building up to this full disclosure on the Epstein files. And then it just kind of went away for a while. And in the aftermath of that, there was a lot of disillusionment that I felt personally that it didn't have more of a profound effect on people. It just seemed as if folks were kind of just going about their business and, oh yeah, I may have heard about that, but the level of horror, and this is what Q had alluded to, was going to unify people, didn't seem to really have that effect. So I guess my question to you is, what was your perspective on that, and ultimately, how does that unification of humanity really manifest? I mean, I know I'm asking you to speculate a little bit here, and we're kind of dabbling with the third party and the Kool-Aid metaphor, but how do we really get there to the place where this all comes full circle?
Well, you said a couple of things. I want to start with the stuff about Trump, right? Trump is a chaos bringer, the water bearer. I'll make my chemistry, analogy again, right? You want a chemical reaction. Sometimes you have to perturb the system, right? You want to reach activation energy. It requires a catalyst. Trump is the catalyst. He is the ripple in the matrix. He is the perturbation in the system. And that is what creates activation energy and then a chemical reaction, and the substances change, right? They turn into the blue Kool-Aid. Now, how does he play that role? Well, seeding Epstein information into the minds of the masses has long been the single hardest thing for me to understand how they're going to do it. Because I've been doing this stuff for a long time. I know the darkest of the dark, and I know you do too, and I know most of the viewers do. It is not something the average person could handle. Even a lot of our viewers, they don't want to hear about certain things because it is the darkest of the dark. So you've got a couple things working against you. Some people just won't open their heads to it. They can't. And I don't fault them. Other people have their own traumas, and this is going to reactivate it. It's going to cause new traumas in other people. So it had to be handled a certain way. So what they did is Trump, the catalyst, allowed himself to be held as bait. That's it. He was a bait. And all it did was get people to talk about the Epstein files without talking about what it really meant. It seeded the idea that all of these crazy conspiracies are true without someone actually having to acknowledge and process the reality of those theories. So it's a kinder, gentler exposure. Soft disclosure, the softest, the kindest, the gentlest. Mm-hmm. But it's out there now. Now, some people it doesn't bother me, or I don't know much about it, like you're saying. That doesn't bother me because I just know people aren't equipped to process it. So someone's like, I don't know. And then better if they say, yeah, Trump's a pedo. I'm like, okay, cool. What else do you know about Epstein? Like, tell me more. As long as you're angry and you're paying attention to it, it's serving its purpose. So I think it was dangled out there with those different releases, with the redactions, was all theater to get people talking, to get people mad. But it's the only way, because you can't, if you dump that, the whole point is to heal humanity so we can ascend. And that ain't going to happen if you re-traumatize people and traumatize new people with the darkest realities of what went on at that island.
Right. And that's always been the difficult conversation surrounding Epstein is how do you, and Q talked about this, is that, we want justice, we want all of those things, but not at a price that we can't recover from, or cost
there you go.
Recover from, right?
That's perfect.
So we understand that all of us anons, people who are paying attention, that we're not going to get everything, the full disclosure, all of the horrific details dumped out into the public. And we understand that despite our own ego-driven desire to be vindicated and all this stuff, and to just rattle the cages of all these normies, that at the end of the day, that's going to be counterproductive, like you just mentioned. Now, my contention is that a lot of people are not going to pay attention to this unless and until we get to the justice phase where people are actually held accountable for these crimes against humanity. Because I think that's part of the disconnect. And I get the tactical reasons why that you just explained perfectly, why they're rolling it out this way, why they're using Trump as bait, why they're doing it in a soft and gentle way. It all makes sense. But I also believe that there's a part of the human mind that the way that we've been conditioned, where particularly the normies, where they're not going to see the relevance of it. They're not going to really embrace the horror of it unless they see that there's an actual consequence, that there's accountability for it. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. That's the hardest part of all this, for all of us, right? But I still firmly believe, the sting operation means no arrests until all arrests. And I fully believe that we're going to have a mass arrest event like we did in Saudi Arabia, and El Salvador. And, it's,
you think it's going to play out that way? Like an EBS?
I really do. And I think that will be, when it happens, the majority of people will be ready to receive it. And there will be so much psychological messaging embedded in it that won't require that certain people, we know specifics of their crimes against humanity, other than we know crimes against humanity. When they say the choice to know will be yours, I think that means that we'll have a means to dig and find out anything we want, but they're not going to be blasting it on Fox and CNN trials that involve cannibalism or pedophilia. I don't think that that's the plan.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. And it kind of, as you were saying that, it conjured the question in my mind of, at what point, I mean, do you think that humanity is approaching a place where they're even remotely ready for a mass arrest event like that, and subsequently the justice phase and all of this, not all of it, but a significant amount of this horrific evil is being exposed? Do you think that we're, in your estimation, do you think we're anywhere close to that?
So, short answer, yes. And frankly, the way the twists and turns that even you and I couldn't predict that we've had, especially over like this last 12 months, have been incredible. We're like, you didn't see that coming. Like, and our whole job has been reading Q and figuring out what's coming. I mean, look at Stormy Patriot Joe, right? He's predicted so many of these things, but some of these things that have happened, nobody could predict. So I believe that there is a way, there is a series of events they could do. I don't know if it needs to be the scare event. I don't know if that's a thing. I don't know if that was COVID. I do believe that there is something we haven't thought of where they could release something, and tomorrow morning we wake up and find out 500 people were arrested. Now, I'm sure thousands would be arrested, but people need to digest what they can digest. It needs to be key people, and the reasons need to be super obvious. But they've seeded everything. They've seeded election fraud. They've seeded Epstein Island.
Seth Rich, of course, back in the news too. Yeah.
Right. So, like, all of those things are in everyone's mind now. So it just takes a masterful narrative stroke, and we've seen nothing but great narratives out of this Ghost Army. And I think everyone would say, okay, what just happened? That makes sense. Okay. So yeah, I do think I think we're ready.
I love it, man. Absolutely.
I don't mean to say I think it's coming tonight or tomorrow, but I think
well, yeah, right. No, of course. We're not doing the predictions, the date fagging as it's called. But just kind of philosophically speaking, are we approaching a point of mass consciousness being ready to shift that dramatically? And because that's the thing, you go about your business every day and you look around and you just see what appears to be people just still in their comas, right? And that's where the disconnect comes from, that I was referring to a little bit earlier. But again, and I'm fully willing to admit this, that our own personal experiences and anecdotal reports about the awakening, the progress of the Great Awakening doesn't tell the full story. It doesn't paint the full picture. And not only that, I've also made the case that when these ideas are seeded into people's minds, the difference between the normie mind and the Anon is that the Anon wants to tell everybody about it. The Anon wants to spread this information. We have the spiritual grounding that enables us to not only digest this information, but we have the desire to spread the truth. That's why we do what we do. The normie mind is very different. There's like this suppression, and I think there's probably the like almost similar to the 5 stages of grief where they go through the bargaining phase. They don't want to believe that it's true, and they're certainly not going to be screaming from the mountaintops about the things that are that about the narratives that have been seeded in their mind, particularly if they're uncomfortable. But I'd like to agree with you and think that we're getting close to a point where humanity is actually ready to face the truth, so that we can move into the justice phase. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, unless and until there's accountability, I mean, I've kind of made a catchphrase out of it, like there's no victory without justice, and meaning like there's not going to be any great awakening or victory for humanity without public consciousness seeing the justice play out and the accountability, regardless of whether it's happening in real time or whether you think it's a replay. The point still stands. So
You know what I think, dude. I think we all of us in this movement make the like most fundamental human mistake, right? What do they say? It's easier to convince someone of a lie than it is to convince them they've been lied to.
right.
Why is that? Because people are by and large not that smart.
And there's ego too.
And ego too,
Yeah.
but an evolved, intelligent person knows how to put ego aside for the betterment of their growth.
Right.
Right? Not everybody, of course. There's, but you know what I'm saying.
Sure.
So, the concept of when you're looking at someone who said something, it's great in relationships. That's why I'm doing all this relationship content, because it's so relevant to what we're doing. And they say something to you and you get offended because you heard it in the lens that you see the world, not in the lens they see the world. In their lens, they just said the nicest thing to you and they can't believe you heard it wrong. We in this community have magnifying lenses on. We see a lot more. And we assume everyone else does. So we say, when is everyone going to wake up? When are they going to see? The truth is never. A lot of them, never. But that doesn't mean their worldviews can't switch, because it's easier to convince them of a lie. And if the lie isn't really a lie, it's just, they're going to just be the followers that the majority of humanity is. So expecting that these average people that we see who are still have their, I got my booster shot sticker on their Facebook, to expect that these people are going to give you this like, aha, we're setting ourselves up for a big letdown. But to know that they're no longer going to be, maybe dyeing their hair purple and using pronouns and trying to kill us at our events, that's good. Like they're going to come along for the ride, because they're simple people, they're basic people, and that's on both sides, not just, liberals are more on the retarded spectrum, but there's unintelligent on both sides. And so they're just going to come along for the ride, right? When everybody's going, they're like, oh, I guess this is what the world looks like now. So expecting the big aha, it doesn't matter. These people will change on a dime when the right situation presents itself, I think.
Well, another question for you that's a little bit speculative, and I apologize, but I respect your opinion so much on these things. One of the things that I've wondered about and explored is, at the end of all this, whenever that happens, regardless of whether it's next month, next year, or 10 years, God forbid, I hope not, but regardless of how long it goes on, we certainly recognize that there are aspects that are scripted, that we're watching a quote unquote scripted movie, as Q indicated. And we talked about the different modalities that are powering that behind the scenes, the quantum computing, et cetera, et cetera. But the question is, do you believe that they're going to script humanity out of this? Like they're going to movie us out of this and maneuver us back into reality, like in the framework of the movie? Or do you think that there's going to be a disclosure of, guess what? There's been a sting operation that's been going on for a really long time. Are they going to because, and I'll tell you why. I just want to front load this and then I'll shut up. The reason that I wonder about that, and I've contemplated it, is that we're looking at rebuilding this entirely beautiful new world. And yes, the choice to know will be yours in terms of the horrific satanic abuse and so forth. But the core elements of what's been playing out now for God knows how long, really, with the Q operation would seem to me to be necessary information for humanity to know the truth, so that we can rebuild on a foundation of truth, as opposed to just psyoping humanity and somehow expecting that's going to eventually
Oh,
merge with reality. Sorry,
that's,
man.
that's heavy, dude. That's really, really good. That's a great question. Are we going to build the new humanity on a foundation of truth?
Yeah,
Dude, that is fucking so good. So let's see if we can get there. Because to start with what you're asking, do I think they're going to psyop us out of this with a narrative and a movie? Absolutely. Does that mean that there won't be an exposure of a sting operation? No, I think it'll be masterfully written into the plot. Okay, because remember this narrative, I think the reason Q is giving us popcorn and enjoy the show so much is so that when the rest of the world is freaking out like they have been for the last couple years, and I'm sure they will be for who knows how much longer, we don't. We stay cool, we eat the popcorn, we enjoy the show. Did Marjorie Taylor Greene flip or not? I don't know. I'm enjoying the show. This is great. Oh, she's on The View now? The View accepted her? I'm like, oh, I can see how this might have been written into the script. Makes perfect sense. So to get us out of this mess and to take every single narrative that's open, Hunter's laptop, what's the Anthony Weiner laptop, the election fraud, like everything that has been left open, no closure on anything. Oh my gosh, the tension that's building. This is a movie, dude. The tension they've built. And it's like it's a choose your own adventure movie. Do you remember the choose your own adventure books when you were a kid?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Dude, those were my favorite. They're like space. People don't remember. Like at the bottom, it tell you which page to go to depending on what you want the character to do next. Does he get on the space station or does he fly away? And then the story changes. And then you read the book again, you make different choices. That's what this is. It's a choose your own adventure movie by the Ghost Army because there's no one size that fits all. Some people can't handle the Epstein stuff. But they're going to be pissed off about their local elections, or they're going to be pissed off about, oh, you mean all those people in my family that cancer wasn't genetic and that farm up the street? Like, there's so many ways to reach the people. Every one of them has been opened. And not only are none of them closed, resolved, no closure, they've used Trump as bait on a lot of them. So that's gotten both sides in. So who cares if people have turned on Trump? That's the plan. So I expect that part one of your question, yes, I do think there will be a perfectly written, scripted psyop that gets us out of this and into another part of this psyop. Do I think we'll build on a foundation of truth? I hope so. I don't know. I think there's always different strata in society, right? Right now, the strata is all socioeconomic. How much money do you make? Where do you vacation? Boom, boom, boom. Maybe there'll be strata based on enlightenment, because if we don't build on truth going forward, what was this all for? Now, there's always going to be hidden things because the military is the military and national security is national security, and we're dealing with AI, right? So we're not going to get the total truth. Like, oh yeah, last night again, they stopped the AI a millisecond before it destroyed humanity again. Like, we're not going to get that level of truth. Yeah.
Right. Well, there's always going to be
something. Great question, dude. That's a great freaking question.
Well, it's these are the things that go through my crazy mind, and there are always going to be things that. I mean, I'm not looking at it in a sort of Pollyanna way of saying, well, all of humanity is just going to know everything and we're all going to align and unify truth. Kumbaya. Like, I don't believe that that's realistic. But if we're talking about the Great Awakening, and certainly for as long as we can remember now, we have been subjected to a rinse, repeat, repetitive cycle of psyop after psyop after psyop after psyop. And eventually, I mean, that's kind of what I've been wondering. Like, is there going to come a point where the psyops end, where they're no longer necessary? And how do we get there and what that's going to look like? Because to me, yes, the psyops are benevolent. They're being done for the betterment of humanity. That the White Hats are using the same basic model that the cabal used against us, and they're reverse engineering it. And we all understand that, but nevertheless, it's still a form of deception.
Right.
And I've always been of the contention of that the Great Awakening has to be unification around the truth. Perhaps not the full truth, but the core elements of the truth. in order for us to rebuild that foundation and move positively into the future. Because look, if the vast majority of people have no idea what they've been subjected to for the past several decades, I mean, depending on how long you want to go back, but even until Trump came onto the scene back in 2015, 2016, if they don't have an understanding that there was some sort of an operation that was going on in order to unify humanity around the truth, I kind of wonder about what that foundation is going to, if that foundation is going to really hold into the future. I guess that's one way to put it. But
you know what? Again, I love that you're going here.
No easy answer.
Here's what I'm going to say. I don't know if the psyops will ever end, and I don't know if I do or don't want them to. Because, well, who was it? Plato, right? The noble lie.
Yep.
You need lies to keep unity and harmony in society sometimes. So as we all ascend, and we're in a situation where maybe some more basic people are freaking out, are you going to lie to them to keep safety and harmony if you know you can and no one's getting hurt by your lie and you're doing it for the betterment of a group? I think you will. I think it's just a part of humanity. We're creatures, we're animals, we're being called to ascend, but we have emotional system and we have a logical system, and they're at odds all the time. We have hormones, so your emotional system changes at different states of your life. We're animals. So can we maintain homeostasis, harmony, and peace if all truth is known all the time? And I'm going to guess the answer is no.
That's not really that's not really the objective of the operation ultimately.
Right. I think it's to usher us into this new world where there's less evil and humanity has maybe a chance to do what God put us here for. That's what I'm hoping for. Well said.
Well said. All right, we're like an hour and a half in. How much time do we got? I don't know what your schedule's looking like. I forgot to ask you beforehand, but you want to do a couple more subjects here? Or do you want to kind of?
Yeah, let's do a couple more. I could do another 30 minutes if you want to.
All right, cool.
Or whatever you want. Whatever you want.
Well, all right. There's a couple other things that I was curious to get your take on. I mentioned Seth Rich since we were talking about a lot of the stuff that's being exposed, and obviously he's back in the news. The other day, it was reported that U.S. government has notified the attorney representing Seth Rich's case that somehow, magically, out of nowhere, several hundred pages of related documents previously claimed
magic
were found in a hidden room at FBI head. I mean, I love that. This is like, I mean, this is the scripted stuff that's just undeniable. That they're found in a hidden room at FBI headquarters. I mean, I got to tell you, they have a lot of hidden rooms and burn bags and trapdoors in that place. It's truly amazing. But this is reported by, I believe it was Ty Clevenger, as yet another example of the evidence that seems to be popping out of nowhere. These hidden rooms, these burn bags at the FBI, which, like I said, to me is very obviously one of the clearest manifestations of the scripted movie that's functioning as a vehicle of declassification that will lead to subsequent revelations about his exposure of corruption at the DNC, his murder, the connection between the WikiLeaks dump, which ultimately prompted the Russiagate hoax 10 years ago when Trump was running for president. They were spying on him, et cetera, et cetera. And this obviously dovetails with so many different keywords that so many CrowdStrike, Ukraine, Julian Assange. I mean, heck, I could go on and on and on as it pertains to Russiagate and Seth Rich. But this is pretty big that they're putting this back on the front burner, so to speak. So I'm curious to get your take on that new development.
Magic. Remember that Shia LaBeouf clip?
Yeah.
Listen, dude, I remember somebody once told us to trust Ray.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I don't know. Maybe it was him. Maybe that's a head fake. But the point is, those bags were left there on purpose. I doubt that those bags were just found. I don't think they'd leave that up to people might find them. But I think that's the narrative, is that these bags were there and, someone left them there.
It's so ridiculous on its face. Like, does anybody really think that they're leaving these burn bags and all of this hidden evidence inside of FBI headquarters? I mean, heck, if all this incriminating information, it's just logic would dictate that would be the last thing that they would do, that they would take and destroy all of this evidence. They wouldn't leave it in FBI headquarters. I think that's
exactly. I agree. Right, the seventh floor is no more. I mean, they didn't leave it there until now. I'll tell you what, if it even ever was there. But I mean, look, the point is, there's another narrative that's going to pull in different people depending on their interests. Seth Rich, that's been completely left open, and just like every other narrative we mentioned, has got its repeat. So we're doing the repeat of that now, which means we're getting closer to some sort of reveal. But nothing's a coincidence. Nothing was an accident. I mean, this was all planned. Did you see who was it? OG Anon, I think. I reposted something they posted like a few years ago. I really hadn't considered that Seth Rich might be alive, and now I'm thinking, yeah, Seth Rich is probably alive.
Yeah,
and I went both ways on that one, but now I'm like, no, it makes perfect with everything we've seen since then. Makes perfect sense.
The coolest robbery, they left his cell phone in his wallet, and all that stuff. They
killed the MS-13 guys who killed him.
Yeah.
Usually, listen, not that I know anything about a mob hit, but if you kill the hitman, it's because they were a liability. You don't let them get found; they disappear.
Right.
So when the hitmen are killed and found, that tells you this is not normal.
Yep, I agree. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, I think Seth Rich is alive and well. He's one of the many I truly believe in. And we've been long wondering, like, when is Julian Assange going to enter the stage again? Because what was it, like a couple of years ago now that he was released from prison, and people were like, yeah, Julian Assange is about to, and then like here we are, all this time has passed. But now that Seth Rich is back in the spotlight, very, very interesting. And then there were these anonymous emails going back and forth saying that Robert Mueller engineered the hit on Seth Rich. So it seems like they're seeding all of this stuff. Of course, Robert Mueller supposedly now is dead. But I guess we're going to have to see how that plays out. So I was just kind of curious to get your take on that. And it also raises an interesting question as well, which is, and this is something, a criticism that I've heard a lot of people talk about, even in reference to something in more recent history, like the stolen election of 2020 or COVID. But you want to go back to Seth Rich and Russiagate and so forth. For the normies, a lot of this stuff is like ancient history, right? And for all of us, of course, this is a non 101. We all know about CrowdStrike. We all know about the Russiagate hoax. We all know about the WikiLeaks, Assange, etc. We're well versed in that. But I guess the question being is, like, at a certain point, do you run the risk of having this stuff be too far in the rearview mirror for people to care about it?
Yeah, I think that's why it's just all these repeats. And that's why, like I say, every one of these things is an on-ramp for someone different. Seth Rich, if it was your on-ramp, it's not too far in the distance. And if it's not, there's 40 other on-ramps into the Great Awakening for society to choose their own adventure. I'm just having this visual, dude, which is kind of like, remember the OJ trial? How long did it last? Was it a year, 2 years? I don't even remember. It was like forever.
Yeah, it went on for a long. I don't remember exactly.
We were watching it at bars, like it was a sporting event.
Yeah.
Imagine this trial, because, all right, listen, maybe this isn't a pipe dream. We know RICO is involved, right? We know conspiracy means you could tie all of this into one case. Everything. Imagine you've got freaking JFK Jr. taking the stand. You got Seth Rich taking the stand. You got Michael Jackson taking the stand. And this would be like the pay-per-view that goes on for the last 2 years of Trump's. Like, can you imagine something like?
I would love something like that, man. Oh my god!
I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I want it to.
Well, it's not. I don't really think it's that far-fetched, because we've been talking about RICO now for such a long time, and Kash Patel has talked about the grand conspiracy case. We've had John Solomon basically every other day giving us updates on how this RICO case is being mapped out and so forth. So my goodness, I mean, that would be, that would almost like be an ongoing EBS, right? It's like if they put that on TV and had cameras inside the courtroom and they laid out this grand conspiracy that goes back God knows how long, man. I mean, they could go back decades. They could go back to JFK Jr. even back in 1999. We're talking about like 26, 27 years of history that they could all weave together into this RICO case, and in the process get the entire world I think it's a great comparison there, like almost like the OJ trial. Just get everybody absolutely fixated on this.
Can you imagine
Oh,
the Friday night event, taking the stand for the defense?
yeah.
Jeffrey Epstein. They're like, I was like, what? No,
They start
he's alive.
yeah, they start.
Jeffrey Epstein comes out. He
Yeah.
takes off his mask, and he's Bill Gates. And then Bill Gates takes off his mask, and he's Stephen Hawking. Only before he got ALS, and it turns out that was just an actor the whole time.
Oh man, I love
And
it.
the real Stephen Hawking's been working at CERN. I don't know. I want to write this movie. This will be a good one.
This is the stand-up comic kind of part of Mark coming out here. I love it.
And over in my chat, my buddy Baskin Logic up in Alaska asked, will the EBS, because you just mentioned it, broadcast actually happen? Do you have a thought on that?
I've always believed it will, and I mean, I always go back to Drop 34, which we know that disinformation is necessary, so there's always the possibility that that could be a giant head fake. But public riots being organized to prevent the capture of senior officials, certain laws being lifted so that the military can basically conduct mass arrests, et cetera, et cetera. I'm with you, man. I think that there's going to be something similar to El Salvador, something similar to, like you mentioned, Saudi Arabia. But I've always believed, and I referenced the quote from, it was I think it was Batman Begins, one of the Batman movies, where he said that people need dramatic examples in order to lift them out of their apathy, you know? And I think that's always been the main reason, because we've been sort of entertaining this question tonight of, excuse me, how are we going to rattle the cages of the normies and wake them up without having society fall apart in the process? But one way or another, in order to get people's attention, I mean, sure, the White Hats have made amazing inroads in terms of getting people engaged, regardless of where they stand as it pertains to Trump, like we talked about earlier. But we're talking about a whole new level that needs to happen in order to really get people to pay attention and to absorb all of this truth. It's not going to I don't think it's going to happen without something super dramatic like that. And the drops make it pretty clear that that's the direction that we're headed, that's what the end game is going to look like. So in my mind, I've never really abandoned that idea that the EBS is coming at a certain point in time, not to mention all of the comms and the tests that we've seen. So
it would be so dramatic. It would be such a great punctuation on the story.
Yeah.
Everyone goes to bed 4 or 5 a.m. You get an EBS. Martial law has been declared. Do not come out of your home for 5 hours. You turn on the TV. You're seeing people all around you being marched out in cuffs, doing the perp walk into these giant paddy wagons. Everyone's home under martial law watching because they don't want you to go outside and interfere if you live in one of those cities. That would be really cool. Get everyone talking. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, the question is like, what would have to precede that, right? And that's sort of where I was getting at a little bit earlier with asking you that question about, like, is humanity ready for that? Are we approaching a point, or are we still a couple of years out in terms of preparation? Because let's face it, I mean, if that actually happens, we're all going to be doing cartwheels inside of our house, and we're going to be like popping champagne the minute the EBS goes off. The rest of the
imagine
world,
a bunch of us, like originally anti-government people, would be like, "Yes, they declared martial law finally."
Right, exactly. That's a huge. I mean, when you think about that for the normies, that is a huge leap from where we currently seem to be right now. And I've always wondered about that question of, like, how much front loading and how much preparation needs to be done so that when and if that does happen, that the people are going to accept it, and you're not going to have massive hordes of people out on the streets trying to fight the military, right? Because that could go sideways. Let's just be honest. I mean, there are a lot of people out there who would, especially with the optics surrounding Trump, that they would view that as an overt military takeover. Like, this is hardcore tyranny. We have to get out in the streets and we have to fight against the military. So what would need to happen to preface that in order for that to be effective? That, I think, to me is the more interesting question of, and where are we at in that process? You know what I mean?
I mean, great question. Who the heck knows? But I would say where we're at in that process is close to another one of those moments where we go, did not see that coming. Everything in the Middle East is ramping up. You know, we had our test runs, Venezuela, and I have no idea what's going to happen. But like, I just think it's going to be something that one of those things we didn't predict, we didn't see coming.
Yeah, I feel you, man. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, a couple more questions. Well, maybe just one more, and then we can kind of wrap this up a little bit.
Before you do that question, can we just can I make this remind everyone that we're simulcasting? Okay. And if you guys this is on Patriots channel and Parallel 8. So if you're on either of them, can you guys go give a like to the other one and help us both out? Because we got a nice little audience in both of these and would appreciate the love.
Absolutely. Smash that thumbs up button, and we really appreciate the love. And yeah, for this time of day, we do have a nice audience. I haven't even popped over to X to see how many people we have watching, but always about quality, not quantity. That's what I say. And I have a high quality audience. That's for sure.
They're the best. They're the best.
They really are. They're amazing. So much love to all of you guys out there. Smash that thumbs up button on both channels. And like I said earlier, if you're not following this guy, what are you doing, man? I mean, go over there and follow Mark on Parallel 8 Media. Absolutely amazing content. You're going to love it.
All right. And back to my audience too. I'm sure they're already following you, but if you're not, you guys got to be following Patriot Underground. What are you, crazy? Are you smoking crack?
Please give me a follow. I would absolutely, I would love that. I would deeply appreciate it if you would. And likewise for my audience. So, all right. So the Supreme Court, and this kind of, I guess in a lot of ways falls into similar categories of what we've been talking about tonight with the movie, the PSYOPs, etc. But as you know, there was a lot of action out of the Supreme Court over the past week. And I'm kind of curious to get your take on a couple of different things. So there was the ruling that, or the opinion that essentially, at least in my understanding, put up a roadblock, or so it would seem, to any progress on the subject of campaign finance reform. It was a 6-3 vote. And, the Supreme Court with a Q, if you even believe that there really is one, that's a matter. And you can weigh in on that as well as a part of your answer to the question. But 6-3 vote, they struck down the federal limits on how much political parties can spend in coordination with their own candidates, ruling that the restrictions violate the First Amendment and overruling, I believe it was a 2021 decision in Colorado. And in my view, and this decision kind of underscores the obstacles toward our voices, like we the people, being heard and actually mattering, as opposed to the lobbyists, the special interest groups in DC. And this seems to be something that the White House, again, that they're putting front and center for everybody to see it, that these lobbyists, these special interest groups, are ultimately the ones that dictate our domestic and foreign policy. So there was that ruling. And then there was also the ruling on birthright citizenship, which in the eyes of most people out there, at least initially, was a massive letdown. And we also had the ruling on the mail-in ballots, which dovetails with the ongoing push to get the SAVE Act passed prior to the midterms. But there were a lot of things that came out of the Supreme Court. So I just kind of wanted to get your general reaction to it. I know that President Trump has indicated that the United States is going to be seeking a rehearing on birthright citizenship. Specifically, I think it's Rule 44 allows 25 days to seek a rehearing. So a lot of interesting stuff coming out. I'm just curious to get your take on that and how it plays into the grand scheme of things and the movie, the PSYOP, etc.
Yeah, dude. I think we're on the same page. I think what year could it have been, like 2021 or 22? I think maybe 21 I think it was when we were all like locked down and working from home. And remember Ruth Bader Ginsburg was working from home, and you could listen to the recordings of their like hearings or whatever you call them up there. Yeah. And she was like phoning it in. And I'm like, that's a freaking computer voice. I'm like, she has been dead this whole time and this working from home. I think the Supreme Court has been under military control from the very beginning of this operation when Trump came down. I don't think anything has been left to chance. Absolutely no way that they're putting these joke of Ketanji. I mean, have you read some of the things she puts in her briefs? the way she writes.
Yeah. It's totally incoherent. It makes no sense.
But she uses expressions that are like spoken slang.
Yep.
In a written formal Supreme Court brief. Come on.
Yeah.
I think this is just part of the exposure and the birthright citizenship by getting struck down is getting everyone to talk about courts, getting everyone to talk about birthright citizenship. That's all I don't know the other things that happened. If you have a specific question about any of them, I'm happy to answer, but I did not track all that stuff this week.
Yeah, well, I wasn't like really going through it at a granular level, but there were certainly like the mail-in ballots, for example, they ruled that as long as they're postmarked by election day, they can come in basically, depending on the state laws, they can continue to count ballots. Like I think California or New York, up to 2 weeks after the actual election, and it raises a lot of questions about. Of course, Trump has continually talked about terminating the filibuster and getting the SAVE Act passed prior to the midterms, and there's been a lot of drama that's kind of been building up around the lead up to the midterm elections. So I was just kind of curious how you see that maybe taking shape. Are we looking at another example of like more stolen elections, more corruption? Has the public not had enough of a dose of that? Do they still need to see more of it? Or does your gut tell you that we might see some like 11th hour action that's going to really secure the elections, like military at the polling places, or perhaps some other things? I don't know. I mean, I could speculate all day long, but
yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I weigh in my mind the benefit, like the risk benefit of military securing an election. Like, what are the optics of that? Does that also look like a dictator? I mean, at the end of the day, I'll say this. The only thing I know is I'm not worried at all about elections. And when I see all these like normie, MAGA, freaking black pill retards out there, a lot of people I used to be friends with, you can't even talk to them anymore. They're just like, they're losing their shit. So I know that's part of the plan. So do they need to have another election stolen in California or New York? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe that's part of the plan. But, you know, everything has been tracked, right? We're just waiting for the reveal.
Yeah. Well, you know, Trump said it was probably like a month or maybe a month and a half ago. Like you said, the passage of time is so hard to gauge nowadays. But he did say that when they release all of the files on 2020, it's going to completely change. It's going to be a game changer, and people are going to realize that the necessity for the SAVE Act and election security and so forth. So I guess I'm kind of curious to see, because they've been stoking the flames on that for quite a while now, whether or not they're going to wait until we get even closer to the midterms and have that be like all of a sudden they just they declassify all of the files on 2020. They proved that it was stolen ahead of the midterms, and how that would play out in terms of the operation. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. I mean, again,
it's one of those things where if you had asked me this 2 years ago, I probably spent the last 80 hours thinking about it, or 80 hours of the last 200 thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I'd have all this. I'm at the point where the things that I'm going to worry about, I've gotten very limited because I've seen that everything's on track. So I'm focusing my energy on different things. I'm just like, I'm finally comfortable saying, I don't know, but I'm excited to find out with you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It took a big personality change for me to be able to say that.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, man. I'm not living in a place of fear. I mean, I'm asking these questions. A lot of them are speculative in nature, but at the end of the day, both you and I agree that this is a controlled operation. Yes, there are kinetic elements. Yes, there are still threats out there. We're not living in paradise, and the war continues. But indeed, the White Hats are, I believe, very firmly in control. And of course, Q told us that was back in like 2017 that at this point elections no longer matter. Right?
Yeah.
You know, but the optics, again, the optics are very convincing. They need to be in order to engage the population. So, you know, we'll see what happens. Now, is there anything that we didn't touch upon tonight that you wanted to quickly mention before we wrap things up? And we covered a lot of ground tonight, but.
Well, I saw somebody make a comment out there and I like it. I think we should do stuff more often, dude.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. More
It's fun.
shows.
It's fun chatting with you. You know,
It is fun.
sometimes, like I always say, like I could be having the hardest week, and when I do my Friday night show, I know you're not always available for those. But I get on the air, and then all of a sudden I had busiest, most exhausting week, and then after a few hours of the huddle, I'm like feeling good again. And I feel that way after what is it, an hour and 50 minutes with you. Crazy busy week, and it's awesome, dude. I love chatting with you.
I love chatting with you too, dude. And you're very, I mean, both of us share the same foundational belief in Q. But one of the things that I really admire about you is that you do have more of a balanced perspective. And I'll be perfectly honest. For a long time, I was very, very solidly in the camp of like everything we're watching is a scripted movie. And eventually I got to a place where I realized that there's a lot more nuance to that. That it's not just simply, it's not that simple. And I really align and resonate with your viewpoint because, and this is I think this conversation is a great example of how you can be firmly rooted in your belief in Q, but at the same time recognize that that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to interpret every single thing that happens as being fake or being scripted, etc. That indeed we are involved in an ongoing war where patriots are clearly in control and have the upper hand, but we're still rooting out remnants of the deep state, remnants of the cabal. And the way that it's been described, I think our mutual friend Lewis Herms put it very in a really a context that makes a lot of sense. Behind the scenes, the white hats took out, if you want to look at it as like the pyramid hierarchy of the cabal, they took out the very top levels first. And then gradually they're kind of working their way down to the lower levels. But the way that it's being presented to the public is exactly the opposite. Like that's why we keep seeing all these reports of these pedophile rings that are getting wrapped up and all of these organized crime and all of these things that are pretty consistently in the news. They're showing us that the low levels are being taken out, but in reality, it's been the inverse of that behind the scenes. So, anyway,
are we going to get into a world where evil doesn't exist? Probably not.
I'd like to think so, but yeah, I don't know.
Like, I mean, what does that even mean? If everyone's good, then everyone's the same. We need polarity. You need masculine and feminine. You need up and down, hot and cold, and you need good and evil. There is no good without evil, right? Otherwise, it's just like the zombie state on like a Prozac. You don't get your highs and lows anymore. You're right in the middle.
Yep, absolutely, man. And that's I've honestly always believed, I've gravitated in the direction that the truth is usually somewhere in between the extremes, right? It's not the black pill, Q's Operation Trust, and we're all being led to slaughter, and it's not the extreme of every single thing that we're watching is scripted. Like we were talking on the phone, how realistic is that to think that thousands of people across the world who are part of this operation? And again, I with Mike King, I've talked a lot about the secret 60,000 man army and the capabilities of military intelligence, etc. And I truly believe that they have capabilities that are far beyond what any of us could possibly even conceive of. But yet again, I still believe at the end of the day, this is a very fluid situation, and that the world, they say all the world's a stage. Yes. But I think to take it to an extreme where you're thinking that that there are no threats. It's almost like, I think the way you described it is it sort of induces a level of passivity. I don't remember if that's the word that you use specifically, but maybe you could speak on that in closing.
Wait, say that again. We're talking the Operation Trust.
Well, no, just really like the idea of the idea that everything that we're being subjected to is fake and scripted.
Yeah,
what effect that has on
it's really comforting. It's really comforting to think everything is. There's so much that is scripted. There is so much of a show going on. We see it every day.
Right.
But there's also evil in this world.
Correct. Yes. And
there's bad people in this world. And frankly, I've said this from the day one. There's certain people, I don't want them to be 2.0s. I want them to get their justice in front of the world. I want to see their face when they perp walk, because they've done horrible things to children. They've manipulated their constituency. They've lied to humanity, and I don't want to think that they already got their justice. So I have that bias. I want to see them I want to see their face when the TV cameras are on them. They got their handcuffs and they're being put in the paddy wagon with everyone else. I really want to see that. So there's always going to be evil in this world, and that's what we're creating, this whole movement. Everyone watching this show, everyone in our movement, we're all shepherds in training, because we're going to be needed for the next couple decades of humanity, until we all I don't know, turn into robots or whatever.
We fully merge with the machines.
I just want to learn I just want to be able to fly. Like, if I could fly, maybe I'd take a little cyborg, like a little Iron Man jet boot in my heel or something. I could.
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah.
I want to fly, dude. That's it.
They're even seeding the idea of teleportation. I mean, out of the official White House accounts, they're putting all types of stuff out there. Maybe on a future show, we can get into some of that.
Let's do that. You know how I love my weather shows? So yeah, I've been doing DEWs forever. Yeah. And the White House again, or Department of War again today, posted a directed energy weapons post. They've been posting them like, yeah, they're real, and we're scaling them up, baby.
Yeah. Did you see the
conspiracy theory, and now they're owning it? It's incredible.
Yeah, I was blown away when I saw the teleportation one. I can't remember what X account it was.
Oh, you're talking about the little Stargate that they had the plane going out of? Yeah.
I mean, that's some pretty crazy stuff right there. I mean, I used to get into this a lot in the early days of my shows. I was really kind of into. I was like neck deep in the esoteric stuff and teleportation, all of these technologies. You kind of seem to indicate a little earlier, a little suspect on that.
Well, hold on, I have to tell little Miss Penny over there in the chat. Isn't she the best? Like, what would we do? What would we do without Penny Lane? Honestly, she's modding both of our chats at the same time.
And she's probably doing Absolute Storm too at the same time.
Yeah. We love you, Penny. So here's what I think about that. I think they hinted at something Stargate wise. They know everyone's thinking about it. And is there a Stargate? I don't know. I think all things that are in sci-fi are probably real or achievable, or we wouldn't have thought of them. Right? So, I mean, do I think CERN is switching us on timelines right now? I doubt it. Is it possible? Yeah. Is the Mandela effect real? No. Are Stargates real? Could be. I mean, we could bend time and space. Yeah. Like, I feel like there's a lot of things we don't know. So did they throw that out there because they're going to disclose it to us anytime soon? Or was it because it had the plausible deniability of future and past, right? The old planes, the new planes, and then that little thing bridging the gap. I think they're doing it on purpose to talk to us.
Yeah.
Whether or not we're going to I won't get my hopes up for that.
Yeah, I'm not going to get my hopes up for it either. But I remember doing several series back in my early days, back in 2021, and it became quite obvious to me in my research that it like you said, if they're putting it in the movies and they're putting it in science fiction, we all know that they have to tell you, like that's the cosmic rule. Like they have to tell you what exists. They can cloak it in fiction and have that level of plausible deniability, but they have to tell you. And I believe that a lot of this stuff, the fact that the Q team clearly is seeding this information on X to the masses, to me seems like they're going to there's probably going to be a lot more interesting developments along those lines. So I'll leave it at that for now because we're coming up to 2 hours, but I just wanted to thank you. This has been a great one, man. I remember some of our previous conversations were awesome too. I remember we did a deep dive on weather modification. That was amazing. I didn't really quite know where we were going to go tonight, but this was fantastic. We covered a lot, and the audience has really been responding very positively to it. I just wanted to say thank you to you. Thank you to everybody out there who took the time to tune in. Once again, make sure you're following Mark at, Parallel 8 Media. I put the link in the description of the video on my channel. There it is, right up at the top. So you guys can just click on that, hit that follow button, make sure you hit the thumbs up. No matter where you're watching, if it's on my X, if it's on Mark's X or our Rumble channel, if you could just help us out with that positive affirmation, we would really, really appreciate it. So in closing, I'm going to be back on, let's see, I'm going to be having, speaking of esoteric topics, I'm going to be having Brad Olson on the show, an old friend of mine, somebody that I haven't spoken to in quite a while. He wrote a book recently. His most recent book is on Antarctica. So we're going to dig into that a little bit. And then later next week, I was invited back onto redpills.tv with Jeff Spike Wong for yet another conversation. He's a great guy. So hopefully folks will tune in for that. Anything you wanted to mention about shows you got coming up? Any projects you're working on?
Yeah, I've been doing, I don't know if you've seen, I've been doing every other week. I've been doing a show with a retired Border Patrol chief, Chris Clem.
I haven't.
He comes out here. So we did a couple interviews about border stuff. And he's like, hey, you open to doing some more stuff together. And we thought about it. He's like, I like your conspiracies. So we'll come at it as me. I've been going down rabbit holes for nearly 30 years. And him, he's been tracking the rabbit as a federal agent for nearly 30 years. Literally, both of us, it's like 28 years or something of this nonsense. So we go out and we look at things from a conspiracy theorist view versus a federal investigator's view. And it's been really fun. We went to the Mandalay Bay and the Luxor, and I showed him the scene of the Vegas shooting, and I did a bunch of, because that's one of my things I know inside and out.
Yeah.
And, gave him a chance to say what made sense or didn't. And so far, he's like kind of agreeing with a lot of this stuff. So it's been pretty cool. But, we have a lively debate because we look at things from different sides. So that's going to be in 2 weeks. Or maybe it's not going to be this Sunday, which it would have been. This Sunday, I've got Kira Bryant on. She's an embodiment coach. And we go into stuff that I know everyone in our chats is going through with friends and family and sort of that nervous system stuff. And I'm just saying, if you saw my last relationship show, I know a lot of people liked it. This is a very different vibe. And I think people are really going to enjoy it. And I hope everyone will tune in at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern on Sunday.
Awesome, brother. Well, thank you once again, everybody out there, for listening. We're going to sign off now, but for sure, we're going to do this a little bit more often. That seems to be the most prevalent comment. Like, you guys really need to get together more often. So,
Let's do it, brother. Love you, man. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. All right. God bless. Godspeed, everybody. I'll see you soon. Patriot out.
Peace.